How's it going, everybody? And welcome to this next edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today, we're going to be talking with Scott Tindall, who is the co-founder of FuelIn, which is an app that basically lets you train stronger, recover faster, and improve your overall performance and health with a training-based nutrition and fueling plan. We talk a lot about that, but we also talk a lot about Scott's past and his history, from working with the Maple Leafs, the hockey team, to working with some of the biggest rugby teams in the world, to working with Team Oracle in the sailing industry, competitive sailing. Forgive me, I don't know that industry super well, so I'm probably pronouncing that incorrect. But Scott is an amazing guy, has an awesome story, and make sure to listen through to the end because you will get 30% off using SQ30 on the FuelIn plan.
Where are you based?
Yeah, so I'm in right outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. I don't know if you know where that is.
Yeah, I know where Chattanooga is. There's always a big race there. So
yeah, for sure. Have you done that race?
I haven't, mate. I've only ever done one 70.3, and that was at Coffs Harbour. So
okay, nice.
It's I don't know. Yeah, I mean, my experience with, I mean, even though I work in the sport, I have limited, I guess,
time,
experience actually doing the racing and whatnot. So but we can get into that a bit more.
Yeah, for sure. So where are you at right now, and where are you from?
I'm in Sydney. Northern Beaches. Have you been here?
I've never been. No, I'm the closest I've ever been is, I think, probably Papua, Indonesia, and it's
surfing?
Not quite the same.
Were you surfing?
What did you say? No, I wasn't surfing. I worked at a summer camp, and the summer camp director was taking a trip over to this area to help out with like a local, they call it a ministry, but it was more of like this aviation base that they had, and they were running a bunch of goods and did medevac stuff like from up in the highlands where it's like super bush pilot. I mean, we landed on runways that were like going uphill and middle of nowhere. People don't wear clothes. I'll have to share some footage with you or something, because it was just absolutely mind-boggling the way people live out there. I mean, I had met some people who had never seen like an iPhone before, and I got to kind of show them their face, and there's just people who've never really been contacted still on those islands that they have no idea of like what life is like out of the bush. So it was quite the experience. But yeah, it took a long time to get to that place.
It is crazy. Like a friend of mine lives in Papua New Guinea, and it's the same thing. There's people in Papua New Guinea who've never met white people.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And you're sort of like, what? And then there's parts of Papua New Guinea that have never been explored, and you're like, how in today's world is that possible? But apparently it is. So.
Yeah, what blew my mind with that whole island, either side, New Guinea or Indonesia side, like you were saying, there's that situation, and then there's hundreds of other dialects and languages that people don't understand, and it's hard to communicate. But then what's even more wild to me is, I think it was like the second largest gold mine in the world is owned and operated there, but by the Germans, which seemed like just such a wild thing. Because when we were flying interior,
welcome to World War I and World War II.
I know, it's like, what in the world is happening here? Yeah. Absolutely wild place, but haven't been to Australia yet. Going to New Zealand for the first time in December, so we'll see how that goes.
For Taupo? For the race?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You qualified?
I did, I qualified last year, so we're gonna give it a shot and turn it into a family vacation. We're gonna tour around for 2.5 weeks after.
Oh mate, I'll be there, so we'll definitely catch up.
Yeah, good. That'd be great. We get to meet you in the flesh then. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Good deal. Well, sweet, man. I want to jump into it. One question I love asking to start these things off is, but I have to say, actually, let's pause for a second. I have sent people to kind of the baseline questions that I usually ask to many people now. This is episode, when it airs, probably around 50 or so. And I've never had someone respond with like little bits of information that I have just like to gather more material. So I really appreciate that. But you seem to be probably the most, I don't want to say type A, but like most well-prepared person that I've ever had on the pod before. So I appreciate that. So some of these questions, some people are going to think, oh, I did a ton of research. Mostly it's just Scott giving me a window into his soul. So thank you for that.
That's so funny. I had another podcast I was on, and they said exactly the same thing. They said they'd sent this thing to so many people, and I was the first one ever to send it back. And
Yeah.
they were like, we were like, holy shit. And then one of the guys was an Australian host, and and he said like his co-host was like, fucking Aussies, because he's also type A, and he was like, you're so organized. Anyway.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. But nevertheless, first question, in your eyes, who is Scott Tindall? And is it Tindall or Tindal?
Tindall.
Tindall. Okay. Who is Scott Tindall?
Who is Scott Tindall? Oh wow, that's a pretty big question. I guess.
Yeah.
Well, first and foremost, I'm a father and a partner. I'm father to little Jack and little Izzy, and a partner to Melissa. I guess that's who probably defines me. Certainly at this stage in my life, it's been an evolution, but that's probably who I am right now.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
Jack is 2 years and 3 months, and Isabel is 7 months. So I'm in the thick of it.
Yeah, for sure. How's fatherhood?
Truthfully, exhausting.
Yeah.
My little boy's got global developmental delay, so I guess he's a child which technically is with special needs. So he was late to walk, and he's still not talking. We had a lot of difficulty with him early on with feeding as well. He had what's called failure to thrive. So he ended up in hospital at 11 months and ended up with a nasogastric tube for feeding, which was incredibly stressful. He kept pulling it out every day. So every day, well, we were in there for a month to try and get his weight up, and it sort of worked, but not really. And then after that, he left the day before his birthday, and he then proceeded to pull it out every single day. And so we had to go back into the hospital every other day to get it put back in. But it turns out he has a very occluded sort of nasal passage. So the nurses really struggled to get the tube into him. And so it was incredibly traumatic for him, but probably just as traumatic for myself and for my partner, because your kid is just screaming in terror and crying. And so it's been, and it's ongoing. And obviously, we don't know where he is with all this sort of global developmental delay. And, there's a good possibility he's probably on the spectrum of autism, where, you deal with in your own way, and you try and get your head around it. But it's not set in stone yet. It's too early to diagnose in Australia. We won't tend to diagnose until sort of 3 or 4 years of age. But he is, he's getting therapies, he's speech, we joke about it. He's seen more specialists, I think, than most people see in a lifetime. So, it's been a journey. But then we have little Isabel, who I guess is what you expect a child to be. She's, she eats, she feeds, she poos, and she sleeps and she cries. So it's all sort of pretty standard. So that's sort of my life at the moment. But children, certainly, I would say, the biggest challenge of my life so far.
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 45, so I'm late to the party as well. Most of my friends have my best mate, his kid is 16. So I'm sort of I'm sort of a fair way behind, but that probably all relates to what I've done in my life, and, how I guess I just did a lot in my life and decided to, sort of knuckle down when I got back to Australia and settle down.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me a bit about your life. Like, let's go back to childhood a little bit. Do you have siblings? And then what was your life growing up?
Yeah, I do. I've got 2 sisters. I've got an older sister called Cassandra and a middle sister called Rowena. I'm the youngest. I don't actually have much to do with my older sister, just for various reasons. My middle sister and I are very close. We grew up in a very small country town in Australia, so down between Sydney and Melbourne, about halfway, in a town that had about 1,300 people in it. And Dad, it's pretty small, and the town was, I guess, a country town in Australia, and there's not much going on there. So Dad was the local vet. He was the veterinarian, and Mum was a stay-at-home mother with 3 kids. So life pretty much revolved around me hanging out at the park and down at the creek and doing an activity called yabbying. I don't know if do you know what
I
yabbying is?
don't know. I had that in my notes. I was going to ask, what is yabbying?
So yabbies are like they're like small crayfish, I guess, freshwater crayfish, or
Okay.
like small lobsters, I guess. If you
Yeah, we have them in
yeah,
Tennessee.
yeah. And so you just sit on the side of a creek or a river sort of thing, and we had one going through town, and you'd sit there with a bit of string and with a bit of meat tied to the
That's
end,
so
and
funny.
you'd catch all these. And I'd
Yeah.
literally, I mean, my childhood memories are doing that pretty much every day. It was either that or kicking an Aussie rules ball,
Yeah.
doing that. So yeah, it was pretty laid back. It was pretty cruisy, and I guess going to boarding school at the age of 12 was a bit of a shock to the system.
Yeah. So let's go back for a second to the
Oh
yabbying
yeah.
because I'm curious. We called it, we call them crawdads, crayfish sometimes too, but we go catch them. And I think the biggest one I've ever seen was probably about that big. But what
Oh,
is your record?
okay, go about double that. So
Really? Man, that's a
yeah,
big guy then. I mean, that's basically a lobster.
yeah, some of them were huge. I've got photos actually, and the funny thing, there's another childhood memory. Like, so what I used to do, because they're obviously in the creek and it's a little bit muddy,
Hmm.
I'd put them in a very like about an inch of water in the bathtub, and I'd put them in there to sort of flush them out, so that it would flush the mud out. But I can remember my grandma, Betty, who was I'm very close to, didn't realize one day and she went to get into the shower, which
Oh
was a
my goodness.
shower bath, and she stood in it and she like ends up treading on all those yabbies that are in there. You can imagine the noises that were coming out
Oh
of
my
the
goodness.
bathroom. But yeah, that was, I mean, yeah, we used to have yabbies always in the bath, sort of flushing them out. And then you do, as you say, with the crawdads, you boil them up and eat them. And yeah, we used to eat them all the time. It was fantastic. I had a little side hustle going where I'd sell them to sort of the Japanese tourists in the park.
Oh,
And
seriously.
they'd try and barbecue, the electric barbecues that they have in public parks, and they'd try and we'd cook them up and things like that. It was pretty funny.
That's funny. What was the going rate for a good sized yabby?
I think it was about 20 cents. It was pretty cheap. But you got to remember, this is a long time ago. This is back in the
Yeah. So
80s.
maybe
So
$2, $3.
20 cents was a lot of lollies back then for us. So
Yeah.
it was pretty good. It's funny you
That's so
say about
funny.
the crawdads. Now I know. I saw that film recently. What's the name? It's something, the crawdads, where the crawdads go or something.
Where the crawdads sing, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah, really great film. I really
I
enjoyed
can't
it.
remember what it's about, but when you said that, it struck my memory. I'm trying to remember
It's about the
what it's
swamp
about.
girl.
Oh,
And
yeah. It's
she kills
relatively
the
new.
guy, or does she kill him, and so on. But yeah, really good
Yeah.
film. So,
Yeah,
and, I always thought crawdads were birds. So there you go.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I thought it was the birds because the opening scene is like this stork flying through the swamp, and so I was like, oh, that must
Oh,
be a crawdad.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I never liked them. My sister was bigger into the catching bugs and stuff like that. For whatever reason, I was not into it as much. I didn't want to get pinched, but
Well, yeah, I guess that's the other thing I used to do, and it's a bit of a weird, nerdy thing, but I used to collect reptiles. And for
oh,
anyone
really?
who knows Australia, like we're pretty well endowed
All of
with
them.
reptiles, and so I used to go and catch blue tongue lizards, which is a lizard distinct to Australia, which literally has this very bright blue tongue.
Wow.
So I'd catch those bearded dragons. I actually have a photo of a bearded dragon in my office, which is a bit weird as well.
Nice.
So I used to do that and walk around town with these lizards attached to the front of my shirt. And, it was just, I think because I was the son of the vet, no one really batted an eyelid and sort of said, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, well, he likes animals and he does that sort of thing. So,
Yeah. So you had a lot of energy. You did tell me in the notes that you were somewhat of a troubled child. So how so?
I wouldn't say I was troubled per se. I was probably trouble.
Yeah, sorry.
I certainly got in trouble a lot. Disruptive in class. Probably today I would have certainly been diagnosed with ADHD.
Sure.
And probably
Any
put
great
on some
entrepreneur.
medication to calm me down. But I guess the way, and yeah, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because mum and dad just let us run around as much as possible to expend energy. And so, I was constantly, as I said, down at the creek, we were swimming, we were yabbing, we were, trying to find lizards, we were climbing trees, we were just playing touch rugby in the park, kicking a footy, like constantly expending energy. And
Yeah.
I guess that's the difference with today, isn't it? If you're cooped up inside and all you've got is like computer games and I don't know, iPhones and whatnot.
Yeah.
If
You're
you've got
missing
all
a lot
that
of the
pent up
world.
energy, is it really is it an issue, or is it more the environment that's causing the issue? So, yeah, I think about that a lot because, yeah, certainly, yeah, there is no doubt in my mind, and talking to my mum and my dad, that I probably would have been diagnosed with some sort of disorder, hyperactivity disorder, or whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's the part of the piece to any great entrepreneur, honestly. I mean, so many successful people I know have been like, yeah, I have ADHD. In fact, I don't know many people who probably don't have it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just because of it's just how people are wired these days, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's the same with, I guess, being on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Like I say, my son's probably on the spectrum. There's probably a lot of people who think I'm somewhere on that spectrum as
Yeah.
well. So,
Sure.
which I guess this is, again, a common trait with, you hear it a lot. That people who sort of have a lot of energy and sort of try and get a lot of things done, they're probably and think in a slightly different way. Maybe they are
Yeah.
on the spectrum of something.
It's interesting. So my dad's sister had our cousins. Obviously, I'm trying to think how many. We have four cousins with them, and three of them were actually on the spectrum at varying levels with autism. One of them with really severe autism, and then one like he's high functioning. Like he has a job and stuff like that. He's just really focused in the things that he wants to be focused in on. But I was always jealous when we were younger because of we would hang out with them a lot, and those three, the boys in particular, were the ones that had like autism. Their ability to play imagination, like I really had to work hard, man, to follow, and it was a cool thing to me. Like I looked up to them, like they'd have these little figurines or even their hands, they would just make these characters in these elaborate stories, and all of these games that you could play, and I absolutely loved it. And it always amazed me the older we got that they still kept that as part of them, in just the way that they went about life. And it always struck me because some of them, like, they're amazing artists. One of them can just do math like it's nothing, like it's just all up there. It all makes sense. So I was always very inspired by that. I mean, it does in some ways make life challenging, but it was some of the most beautiful moments I have from childhood were from my cousins who had autism. And yeah, and I was really fortunate because I feel like a lot of kids actually, when they don't know what's going on, things are uncomfortable, kids make fun, so that would happen to them. But for me, it was always like, oh, I want to get to know, like, what's your superpower? Like, some kind of a cool thing that you can do that I can't do. I want to know what it is. So yeah,
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, I think awareness of this is certainly improving and increasing. So I think teachers are far more aware of it, and then children are being made aware of it, and not necessarily to tease kids and bully them and things like that. Where, you think back to, I mean, I don't know, how old are you? You look
I'm
relatively
31.
young. Yeah, you're young. So, I can think back to school and, kids who probably were on the outer. They did get bullied and they did get harassed and things like that. And whereas, I think that times have certainly changed in that respect with regards to bullying and acceptance and those types of things, so, which is, a positive, I think, for kids growing up, because it seems increasingly difficult to be, just be part of whatever they're part of these days.
Yeah, for sure. So going back a little bit to when you were younger, one of the things you wrote to me was that your mom got really sick throughout your childhood. What happened? What was the impact on your life?
Yeah, so mum, I guess it's the diagnosis of chronic fatigue, or ME.
Okay.
She was diagnosed with that, and she just ended up, she had no energy. She was sick all the time. I can remember, like, every day she was in bed, and so
Wow.
it was very difficult. And I guess, like, and she actually reminded me of this, that I used to come home and make her cups of tea and just sort of try and help her and things like that. And I was like, I don't actually really remember it that much. I just remember her being in bed. It's funny what you
Sure.
remember from childhood. But I guess, like, somewhere in me, I guess I had some sort of empathy for what was going on. And
Yeah.
I guess just this I guess I wanted to try and help her. So
Yeah.
she said I used to make her tea and try and make her some food and things like that to try and comfort her. But yeah, she was sick. I mean, it turns out years later, I mean, they just didn't know these things at the time, but she ended up only probably in the last, it's probably 5 or 10 years now, probably 10 years where she was diagnosed with celiac disease.
Oh,
So
wow.
what we now, when you reflect on it, she couldn't eat anything. The only thing she could eat, again, things that stick with me is like she could eat rice bubbles or what you call Rice Krispies. She could eat
Okay.
that with some tinned pears. And that was literally all she could eat. And she could drink
Wow.
like this certain herbal tea. And, I mean, obviously she would have been able to eat other foods, but it was clearly the celiac disease and, the GI distress and the pain that was being caused as a result of that condition that was causing, a lot of her issues in fatigue. And then, when you've got chronic pain causes, depressive episodes. I don't know if you've ever had pain for a very long time, but it gets you down pretty quickly. And
Yeah.
so, and I've talked to mum about this a lot. Like, is it depression that causes the sickness, or is it the
Mm.
sickness that causes the depression? And there's
Mm.
probably a little bit of two-way. And we know
Yeah.
that, the impact of the gut, its effect on the brain, because there is this two-way relationship between the gut and the brain. And, if you have altered, you know, um, gut function or dysbiosis, like it's altered sort of bacteria in the gut, that can have negative effects on things like serotonin production.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if you know, but 95% of your serotonin is produced in the gut. Most people think of it as being something in the brain.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah. So if you've got like, a chronic gastrointestinal disease, then, and it's not working properly, there's a good chance that's probably going to have an impact on the brain as well. And
Mm.
so I think over time, like, finally, when she was diagnosed as a celiac, obviously goes on a very strict gluten-free diet,
Yeah.
which is medically controlled and medically proven. And, that's had a huge impact on her life in terms of her being able to function. But I can think for, the better part of 30 years or 40 years, she was misdiagnosed and pretty much in chronic pain. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's one of those things, I guess there's advances in screening
Yeah.
that certainly have made a huge change to her life, but also I know many other people who do suffer from like a diagnosis of something like celiac.
Yeah. I can only imagine how that must have shifted her life in a positive way. I mean, she's obviously probably built a tremendous amount of resilience through the years, even if it does get you into more of a depressive state. Like, I can't imagine. I've had different issues growing up, but never to that extent or for that longevity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah,
intense.
I mean, I think, I would say mum is fairly resilient. I mean, I think back to her, my dad, yes, he was a veterinarian. He was also randomly a cowboy, which we can get
Okay.
into. But dad wasn't present a lot growing up. He wasn't there. He was, and again, like I've talked to dad about this, but it's sort of that era. His dad was not really
Yeah.
like present in his life in that sense, and I think their era was the man, and he did his thing. He worked, and so he didn't really help with bringing us up the kids so much. Like
Yeah.
he was present but not present, and so like it was all on mum to bring us
Yeah.
up. And I don't know, like I have two kids, and I have a partner that does a lot, and I try and help out as much. But
Yeah.
God help if there was only one of us doing it. Like, and there's only
Yeah.
two kids. Like mum had three, so
Yeah.
I don't know. I think any woman that manages to bring up kids either on their own or as a result of their partner not necessarily being there to help, I think they're pretty much super women. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think of my mom because my dad was no longer in the picture. He passed away when I was 16. So she brought us up, and I was 16. I'm the oldest of three, just exact opposite of you.
yeah,
And yeah, me going through, I was a late bloomer, so I'm just figuring out what does it mean to be a man. And then my younger sisters were 12 and 4, so she made a lot of mistakes, and we've come to terms on those things. But the ability that she had when she could have just throw her hands up and do whatever she wanted. I mean, she could have been a drunk. She could have
yeah,
left us for dead or to live on her own, like type of a situation. So yeah, it's always amazing to see that mothers and fathers, when there was just one parent households, and then they persevere through it's a pretty amazing stuff to be able to see and witness that. I'm very fortunate. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's it's probably the hard. I got Mel was showing me something. It was like an Instagram thing, and it was like a spoof on like a job interview with people, and it was like effectively describing a job description of a mother, and then interviewing these people, and it was like, you're probably going to work somewhere between 20 and 23 hours a day. Sleep is not really an option. You won't get paid. Oh, and then at the end, they're like, they said like, how much will you get paid for this job? It sounds like a lot. And they're like, absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah. And they're like, what? You can't do that. And so,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. No, totally true. So you were mentioning earlier that you went to boarding school at a young age and that was a big change for you. So tell me about that, like from the perspective of 12-year-old Scott, and then you also mentioned that there's some things that you might have changed now that you're older. So what are those?
Yeah, I think, look, anytime you go from a town of 1,300 to a school of 14 or 1,500, it was pretty bizarre. So the school I went to was bigger than where I grew up. So, it was, there's two ways of looking at this. And again, I've talked to my parents about it. Like, I was incredibly lucky to be sent to a school, like a prestigious boarding school in Sydney. And mum and dad probably killed themselves to have the money to allow myself to go there and my sisters to go to a similar school in Sydney. And so I think in that respect, like if I didn't do that, then I probably, there's always those sliding door moments, isn't there, in life? Like if I stayed in the local high school or something, where would I be?
Yeah.
Would I have done the things that I've done in my life? And I probably doubt that because, as much as you can, people can say it, like, yes, going to one of those schools is great for education and for, being exposed to everything that you could ever want. But it's also, you meet a lot of amazing people as well. And I think the connections do help, and they help in life. Like, you make friends with people who then end up somewhere, and then they're like, oh, you know this person and you know that person. And yes, you've still got to be good enough to keep your foot in the door, but it does certainly help to get your foot in the door in the first place. And that, people can dismiss that and whatnot, but that's just the way of the world, unfortunately. Like it's generally connections that get you at least an opening and an in, and then you've got to prove yourself. So I think in that respect, like going to a school like that was, invaluable in my life and the trajectory that my life took on. Sure. But at the same time, I was in a boarding house being brought up by, young men, probably between their 20s and 30s who, had the ability to put on you whatever they believed in. So I think you were effectively raised by people other than your parents. And I'd say there was probably some questionable morals and values of those individuals at times. Some of the things that went down, nothing bad like sexual or anything like that, but certainly there was some physical, I would say probably nowadays it would be considered physical abuse that we got. But I guess it also made you resilient. It hardened you up a bit. You can have that sort of approach on it. I don't look back at it as it was a terrible time. Did I love boarding school? No. Did I love being around my friends all the time? Yeah. Could I kick a footy? Could I pass a footy? Whatever. Like any time of the day, could we bowl a cricket ball at each other? Yeah. It was like a sleepover 24/7. So that was cool in a way, but you miss your parents.
Sure.
I think you miss that bond that I imagine you have with your children if you're with them all the time and you're bringing them up and you're having family dinners and doing all that. And, it's a rock and a hard place because my parents, I know certainly they wanted that, but they also wanted me to have the best. So, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. I guess,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, isn't that the story of life? Yeah. How often did you go home? Like just for holidays and Christmas, that kind of stuff?
So home, this small country town, then we moved to a farm, which actually wasn't that far away either, but it's about 5.5 hours, 6 hours south of Sydney. So it wasn't like you could just go home on the weekend. So, I'd tend to go home sort of at the end of semesters. So, and then During winter, because I played rugby and I was all right at rugby. Mum and Dad would try and come up and watch games and catch up with us then. So we'd see them on weekends every now and then. But yeah, it wasn't always that regular.
Yeah, for sure. Some of those values you were talking about that maybe were a little lacking. I mean, I also went to a boarding school off and on through high school, so I got a little bit of an experience of that, being away from home and yeah, just the craziness. I mean, just really quick, one of the crazy things we did was we would line up in the hallways and we'd put mattresses like in the hallways and we could like line the hallways with them, and then you would like squeeze each other. Like somebody would squeeze two guys. They're at the end of the hall. You'd squeeze them really hard for like 30 seconds, like almost suck the wind out of them. And then you'd let them go and they grab a mattress and just run as fast as they could and hit each other. And somebody would pass out. And for some reason, like that was fun. I don't know.
Oh, mate, we used to do all crazy things.
Like it's just absolutely wild.
I know. Some of the stuff that you didn't
do.
die from, like it's actually quite amazing in boarding school. Yeah, I know. So, but yeah, I don't know. Boarding school was great. The school was great. Like the level of education, again, the access to sporting coaches and facilities and things like that. I can remember like. I wouldn't say my grammar is still the best and things like that and sentence structure and whatnot, but certainly from the time I got to Knox and then, by the time I'd finished, I'd worked my way up and, was in top academic classes for English, for maths and science and whatnot, and then still managing to, be in the first rugby and stuff like that. So it was I pushed myself, and I think that came from mum and dad. And I think probably deep down, I realized how much effort they had made or how many sacrifices they'd made to send me there. And I guess my personality was always to try and be the best that I could be and do the best that I could. So I certainly applied myself to both academia and to the sporting field and to try and achieve as much as I could, which obviously then put me in an interesting position because then you're sort of, you're in the nerd classes and then you're also with the jocks on the fields and whatnot. Yeah. So it's but that was cool because then it sort of gives you that, I guess, rounded perspective of social circles as well. And I guess that helped in later life as well, where you could sort of, it doesn't matter who you're mixing with or who you're in a room with, you should be able to hopefully socialize with anyone. Shouldn't be sort of pigeonholed to, who you are or what you're apparently meant to be.
Yeah, pretty even tempered to be straddling both sides of those fields because I feel like that isn't most people, like you said. To be able to, it definitely makes a difference. So then, what was because you played rugby, but what was the progression like as you went through high school, and then did you go to secondary school, and then what was your sporting life from then on?
Yeah, so in Australia it's a little bit different. We just have one school that we go to. Okay. So you start in year 7. I was 12, so I was young for my year. Usually you're 13 when you go in, and then you go all the way through to 6th grade or year 12, and you usually finish when you're 18. Again, I finished when I was 17. So you stay in the same school, and which is really good in a way because you progress through with your year group, and obviously, you've still got I've still got friends from life, for life. Yeah. Like, still, my best friend, the guy I said before, who's got a 16-year-old, we're still best mates, and we've known each other for God knows way too many years now. So
most of your life.
Yeah, exactly. So, the main focus of sport for me was always rugby. I guess I enjoyed playing Aussie rules and rugby league as back in the country. And so when I went to boarding school, they didn't have any of those sports on offer, but the closest thing was rugby union, and I sort of gravitated to that. And I guess I excelled in a way. And so, I just pushed on through and it got selected for state teams and then national teams as I sort of progressed as a 17, 18, 19-year-old. And that was pretty cool. It was good. Sort of went to university, continued playing and tried to balance studies. I was studying physiotherapy at the time. I was doing my bachelor's when I graduated from high school. And, you have dreams of becoming a professional sportsman. I think if you're somewhat all right, and I guess I always think of Friday Night Lights and
Yeah.
that show in America, and I guess
Hmm.
there's always those dreams of having your names up in your name in lights and being a professional sportsman. But that all sort of got cut short when I was 21. I think I had a pretty catastrophic knee injury as a result of
Mm.
a very big individual's head and shoulder and the left side of my left knee.
Ugh.
So that was
Yeah.
sort of
Whew.
a ruptured
Hurts my stomach.
ACL, MCL, and meniscal injuries. And
Mm.
yeah, I had surgery, and it's good. Like I got back to playing rugby, but never back to the level that I probably wanted to. And
Yeah.
maybe it was just that realization as well. Maybe I just never was as good as I thought that I could be, and it was
Sure.
maybe it gave that sort of like, okay, now I need to focus on something else.
Yeah. So after you finish that chapter in your life, like are you graduating in physio? Like you still played throughout university, and then you just kind of let it go, and then you went off into the working world?
Yeah, so I finished physio, and then actually I moved to England shortly after. I think after a year of just being in the workspace in Australia, because I had an English girlfriend at the time, and I'd always wanted to go to England and sort of travel. I think I had an inherent travel bug in me, and that certainly
Yeah.
flourished over the next sort of 20 years. But yeah, moved to England, just settled in, started doing locum work and that, and then ended up working in a private hospital there. And they, thankfully, I can't remember, we got like a flyer on the desk, or one of the girls that I was working with said she's going to do a master's in sports medicine. And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Thinking though that my undergraduate was terrible. Like I failed in my first year of physiotherapy. I failed a subject, and I'd never failed anything in my life. And I was like, holy shit, like I just failed something. What's going on? And I think it
Yeah.
was because, I went to college at university, and that was just a disaster. I mean, I don't know, anyone who's been to college at university, it's definitely not a focus on studying. It was definitely
Yeah.
a focus on having a hell of a good time. And
For sure.
yeah, the reality is I just wasn't doing enough and wasn't really focused. And so I think it was a big comeback down to earth from like a private school to sort of very much self-led learning in
Hmm.
university. So I eventually got through my degree, my undergraduate degree, and then for some reason I thought I'd be a sucker for punishment and go and do a master's in sports medicine. But
Oh
I
my.
think the difference was I actually chose to do that. And I know it sounds funny, like, yes, I chose to do my bachelor's, but the reality is you sort of finished high school and you were like, oh shit, what am I going to do? And my friend at the time was applying to get into physio. And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. I see physios all
Yeah.
the
I guess
time
I'll do
because I'm
that.
always injured. Sounds like a great job. Let's do that. But I, like in hindsight, okay, it worked out well for me, but
Sure.
I had no idea really what I wanted to do when I was 17 for the rest of my life. And so I think in the end, I wasn't really that focused on my undergraduate studies. But when I went into my postgraduate studies, I was like, you know what, I actually really want to do this. And I was keen. And so, yes, every night, I'd work whatever, 36 hours a week, but then every night was at my desk studying and doing that. And so, yeah, I got through the 2-year degree in just over a year. Actually, I sort of tried to do it accelerated, and somewhere along the lines, I guess I could apply myself. I graduated with distinction, which was good, from
Wow.
the
Good for
University of
you.
London, Queen Mary, which was
Wow. Yeah.
probably a surprise to me and certainly to my mother. I
Yeah.
think she was more surprised than me, but she actually flew over to London and came to my graduation ceremony. And yeah, I'm just looking at, I've got a picture on my wall here with me and her, and I think she was probably more proud than me. But
Yeah.
so that was great, and that sort of then changed the whole trajectory of my sort of career, I guess, because that opened up doors to then start working in professional sport, and that led me, to work in professional rugby and then all the other things that I've sort of done.
Do you miss professional rugby working?
I think it's changed a lot from when I worked in it, probably good and bad. Again, I think back to boarding, like, I think it was a bit like boarding school, really, because it was full on. Like,
Really?
I give examples. Like, so I'm still really good friends with a few of the guys who I worked with, because I was sort of about the same age or a little bit younger than some of these guys. And the team I worked for, which was called Leicester Tigers, they were sort of national champions and pushing for European champions and all that. So it was a very good team, and I was extremely lucky to have that as my first job.
Yeah.
And, you had, it was just an uber aggressive club. And that's what made it so special. Tuesdays they had full contact sessions, which now no longer happens in professional rugby. They just don't do that because of the whole concussion.
Get injured before a break.
And injured before games, but Tuesdays were just hell. Literally all the physios, the medical team would be like, fuck, here it goes. Here goes Tuesday. There'll be injuries. And they were just smashing each other, and you'd have coaches just telling them to smash it. And then, come game day, players would get knocked out, and, then you'd go on the field and you're like, this person's clearly concussed, but you'd have the coach in your ear just be like, don't you dare take him off. Don't you dare.
Oh my goodness.
If you take him off, you don't bother coming in on Monday.
And it's not like football. It's such a brutal sport.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there's no padding or anything like that. So it's very different. They just played a form of rugby just the other day in Las Vegas. I don't know if you saw it. It was rugby league. No. It was rugby league in Las Vegas, and it was pretty awesome to watch, actually. Wow. So, sort of rugby league is a little bit like gridiron without all the pads, and there's not as many rules. It's just literally a bunch of guys running full contact, full speed into each other and smash. It's perfect for America, honestly. I'm surprised Americans haven't got fully behind rugby league.
Yeah.
But yeah, I look back at the time at Leicester, and I speak to some of my friends who were players who did get really badly concussed, and I've said to them I'm so sorry for not actually looking after you more when it was my responsibility to do so. And yeah, they honestly, their response is mate, I wouldn't change a thing. They're so happy to have had the careers that they have had, and they accept. They also they come from a different sort of, I guess it's a different breed. They accept their responsibility because they knew what they were getting into. Okay, They may not have understood concussions very well, but they certainly understood the risk, the danger and the risks of playing a sport which was so severe in terms of collisions. So it's certainly changed a lot. I hear a lot of different things about. I saw it at the Maple Leafs when I was there. I went there thinking they're all going to be exactly the same as rugby players, and sadly, I thought they were most of them were incredibly soft, and I was like, wow. So yeah, some very hard guys there. And some guys that I really had a lot of respect for, but there were a lot of players there that I was just like, God, they're just whingers, and they're just big girls, honestly. I shouldn't say big girls.
We're marking that one. That one's going to be a good reel.
Yeah, don't put that in. They were just incredibly, I don't know. It was just very different. The way that, I don't know, there was just a lot of whinging. Just didn't crack on.
What is whinging? That's beyond me. Culturally, I don't know what that means.
Whinging?
Yeah.
Whining.
Shirking?
Whining. Just it was always too hard or too much, or things weren't right. I mean, you're talking about the biggest pampered, you've never seen more pampering in your life. I mean, I had no idea, to be honest, when I worked at the Leafs. I didn't realize how big they were when I first got the job.
Yeah, the Maple Leafs, the hockey team?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know hockey, but I know the Maple Leafs, and that's a huge job.
Yeah. So when I was working there, and I didn't realize. I mean, you flew on a private jet everywhere. You stay at the Four Seasons or whatnot, every hotel, and it was a big It's very different from working at Leicester Tigers, where you're staying in the Holiday Inn or something like that. But they were national champions and had no issues. And then you got the Leafs, who haven't won in 63 years. And they still go on about their 11 Stanley Cups. I know I'm having a go here at the Leafs, and I'll probably get shot down.
Oh, that's totally fine.
But I'm like, guys, if you want to win something, harden up. Yeah. Literally harden up. And that's the problem. I think they're so stuck in their historical ways and talking about the past, they haven't moved into the future.
Yeah, they have
no vision. I think that's a real issue at that club. That's certainly what I see, and what. I've spoken about with the guys, the performance team that I worked with that no longer work there. We've all had very similar discussion about it.
That's interesting. So what exactly did you do with the rugby team and then the Leafs? Was like sports physio? Because you're talking about concussion when you're like on the medic team, you're just making sure people stay well.
So with the union and the rugby, so rugby and cricket and whatnot, I did physiotherapy.
Okay.
So I was physio and as part of the medical team, and then I went, I guess, with the like my education. I ended up doing postgraduate studies in nutrition because that's sort of I was very interested in that after doing my masters, and that then led to get involved in the America's Cup. I don't know if you know what the America's Cup is. It's professional sailing. So we then relocated to Bermuda. So we were living in Bermuda for 2.5 years, where we defended the 35th America's Cup, and that's sort of
Oh, wow.
catamarans on foils. I don't know if you've seen
Yeah.
the boats. They're very
Yeah,
cool.
they're super fast. It's wild.
Super
Crazy.
fast. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was cool. So there I got to do nutrition for the team and also be the physiotherapist. So that was sort of the transition in my life to sort of say, actually, I love nutrition and would like to go down that route. So I sort of segued at that point in time. And after that, I got a job. I got offered the job with the Maple Leafs, and there I was the team nutritionist for the season, which was I mean, look, I know I sound like I was shitting on them, but it was an amazing experience as well.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
Again, made friends for life within that job. I think it was just, I don't think, I just think there could have been some cultural changes within the organization to
Sure.
make the players more accountable and make them more responsible for what they were doing. I think there was a lot of talk is probably how I'd describe it rather than a lot of action.
Yeah. Do you think if they called you up and said, "Hey, Scott, we need a nutritionist again, but also we need a physio, and by the way, would you also coach and help change the culture of the Leafs?" Would you do it?
Definitely not.
No, not even if they offered you $1 billion for FuelIn.
They would, if they offered $1 billion for FuelIn, then yes, absolutely. It would honestly come down to, I mean, look, I think personnel, like, you can talk about culture in teams, and that's the thing that defines a team. And this is the really cool thing that, culture doesn't always mean you're going to win the cups.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, if you've got a great culture, the likelihood of winning is going to go through the
Yeah,
roof.
it goes up.
So the culture at Leicester, whilst being sometimes probably too masculine, there was a culture of winning. And there was a culture of belief in the way that we did things. And same in Oracle, Team USA, we didn't win the America's Cup back. And technology plays a huge role in that sport. But
Sure.
the belief
money
and
too.
the culture in that team that was created by our performance director, Craig McFarlane, and Jimmy Spittle, who was the skipper, and Tom Slingsby, who was the tactician, like, it was an unbelievable 2.5 years to be with a group of young men who developed into just amazing men. And so, but then you had the flip side of going to a team where, these guys at Maple Leafs, I mean, God, they get paid a lot of money. I had no idea that these players got paid like $60 million.
6D?
60 over, for a 5-year contract and stuff. But still, I was like, sorry, $60 million. But
That's wild.
yeah, there should not be a complaint in the world if you're getting that much money. But yeah, it wasn't there. And I don't know, have you ever read the book Legacy? There's a great book, Legacy by, who's it written by again? Where is it? It's written by a guy called James Kerr.
Okay.
And I would recommend you and all your listeners buy this book. It is a book about the New Zealand All Blacks. Do you know who the All Blacks are?
Rugby team?
Rugby team.
Yeah,
And
I think that I heard this story.
yeah, it's a great book because it's actually a business book and it's about culture. And the irony was that the GM at the time used to walk around with this book under his arm and quote things from it. And I was like, "Mate, have you actually opened it? Have you read it?" Because there's things in there like sweep the sheds. So sweep the sheds is a saying that no one is too important to sweep the sheds, like the change room, to clean up the change room at the end of the game. And if you've ever seen any footage of the Rugby World Cup and the Japanese team in particular, they leave the change room probably in a better condition than when they entered it. I mean, it's spotless. So do the All Blacks. So do actually pretty much all the teams do it now. And they go on a roster. So it doesn't matter if you're the captain, the highest paid player, the lowest paid player. You're in a roster and you sweep the sheds. No one is above that. Wow. And that's like just something that just should be with us for life. Like, no one is better than anyone else. You're all on an equal, you should all be on an equal playing field. But unfortunately, it wasn't always the case. There was always the big dogs and the low dogs there. And, you know, I think that's part of the problem.
Good stuff. And who was it by again? I guess we'll link it in the show notes.
James Kerr.
James Kerr.
Yeah, it's also got a very famous one in there. So the All Blacks took a saying or a slogan from another team in Australia called the Sydney Swans, which is an Aussie rules team. And that saying, or they have this big slogan across their change room, which is no dickheads. And
so that's one of your values.
Yeah, and no dickheads was this thing taken on by the All Blacks. And then, like, I know we talked about it a lot at Oracle, and we certainly had it at Leicester, but it was like no dickheads. Like, everyone's just, you know, you just knuckle down, you do your thing. Yeah, people joke around and have a good time. Sure. But in the end, everyone, like, you know, it's about the team.
Yeah.
So
I didn't realize that I was talking to someone with such a vast history of experience, and I probably shouldn't even admit that on the podcast, but I didn't realize you went to all these different teams. Like Oracle, obviously Oracle's the name of the main sponsor for that team, right?
Yeah.
And that's a huge team. I don't know how they're doing nowadays, but that's such an amazing like trajectory of life. So how did you move through all of those things, and then now you're co-founder of FuelIn? Like, you can talk about what FuelIn is, but how did you make that jump and decide I want to leave all of these arguably very well paying or promising like levels of career to move into the world of an entrepreneur where you're not sure what tomorrow will bring?
That's certainly true. Yeah, I guess so I did work in between Oracle, Team USA, and then the Maple Leafs. I did work in Boston, and I worked at a biotech startup, which was a very interesting experience because it gave me, I guess, an insight into, as you say, entrepreneurship and sort of startups and possibly things not to do within a startup. And certainly, again, coming back to culture, I think was a big thing. So, but I worked there with the performance director from Oracle, Craig McFarlane. He and I lived together in Boston together and had a excellent time living together. But the startup was, you know, whatever it was, questionable at best. But during that time, I started working with a professional triathlete, Sarah Piampiano. And she had a lot of issues, gut issues, things like that, and race fueling issues. And so I started working with her. And I guess that's when I started just, you know, devising these principles and this sort of schedule, which all came down to reflecting her Training Peaks schedule and reflecting that in Google Sheets. And it I don't know, at the time, I think I just saw it as logical. And there was a research paper written, which did talk about like this traffic light system, like red, yellow, green in relation to I think calories. It was more in relation to calories, like lower calories, moderate calories, and high calories. And then I manipulated that, did it in relation to carbohydrates. So on the Google sheet, she would just see these cells like red, yellow, green in relation to her snacks. And I thought it was like pretty cool. She thought it was amazing because it was actually in line with the training she was doing, as opposed to, I don't know if you've ever had anything from nutritionists or dietitian. It's all pretty much a theoretical exercise of if you've got a hard session, you need to consider having this amount, or if you've got not a very intense session, you consider eating this sort of food. But then you need to factor in if you've got a second session, then you maybe need to eat this sort of amount. And so in the end, most people get so confused with it. They're like, oh, I can't be bothered. It just sounds too much. And I'll just eat whatever I feel like eating. So she loved it because of the specificity of what I was doing. Like, it was sort of dialed in that every meal before, afterwards, and all her in-session fueling was sort of attuned to what her coach, Matt Dixon, was giving to her at the time. And I guess from there, she started talking about it a bit, and then other athletes started reaching out to me and sort of saying, hey, could you do my nutrition? And I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds cool. Pretty quick, sort of built up a roster of sort of 20 or 30 people, which was cool because it was like a side hustle, I guess, at the time. Yeah. But a side hustle that ended up taking quite a lot of my time, because building out manually these sort of programs each Sunday sort of sucked, because like every Sunday I'd be working sort of 10 hours to do all these programs. And, you know, when you're working also sort of 40, 50 hours a week, which eventually was at the Maple Leafs, and traveling every second day to a different city or an ice rink, it sort of got very tiring. So
seriously.
From there, Matty Dixon actually introduced me to some tech guys in San Fran. And so I was laughing about this with, his name's Jonathan Lee. And I took a year off and started traveling around the world in 2019. And I think I was traveling through Bosnia, Herzegovina at the time. And I was on WhatsApp chatting to him, but the really funny thing was, so one of my mates broke his neck in 2008, and he's a quadriplegic. So then we were traveling through not really Eastern Europe, but sort of around the Balkans and whatnot. And so we're traveling together, and Jonathan's speaking to me, and he had an idea about an app. And my mate's sort of giving him shit, and I'm giving him shit about this, and we're sort of talking about, and he's like, I had a look at your Google sheet, and I think that's really interesting, and maybe we could do something with that. And I was like, yeah, sounds good. And then we ended up chatting for a few months, sort of just seeing how we got on. And then he's like, do you want to set up a company? And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. Not really thinking about it too much. I'm a bit like that. I sort of just jump into things. And so we inaugurated a company in Delaware C Corp. As everyone does, because of tax reasons. I probably should cut that out. But
it's all good.
We just got it going, and then started building a web-based app, and started charging for that and seeing if people had an appetite. And we were like, oh, this is kind of cool. And it's been a slow burn though. Like, honestly, 2 years since the iOS app has been launched, and I think you have dreams of 150,000 downloads in the first month. And the reality is it's not going to be that. And especially when you're charging, we charge a bit for, the service, because it's an extremely small team. It is bootstrapped. We've never really had any investment. We had a very small amount of money put in very early doors, but it's been all on us. And, you said thinking about tomorrow, I guess, for a year I didn't take a salary, which is brutal. And then this past year has been a very low salary, and it's extremely depressing watching your savings dwindle away. That you've worked hard to save. So it's turning the corner. It's definitely turning the corner now, and we're starting to see the fruits of our labor. And we are looking to raise in the next 6 months. So anyone listening who wants to get involved in an awesome sports tech startup, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, for sure. So this is going to be like your Series A, or are you calling it a seed round?
No, this is a seed round. So we're looking to raise sort of 1.5 to 2, and got a lot of interest. And it's a bit of an interesting time, I guess, to be raising. Just the way everything is. But I think just based on the numbers we've got and what we're seeing with acquisition of numbers and revenue and that, I think it's really positive. So I think, you see these companies shutting down, don't you? I mean, you saw Super Sapiens shut down the other day, and God, I mean, I think they raised 60 million, but I guess the difference is the business model. I think.
Yeah, you got to make money at the end of the day.
Well, that's the thing I look at. Like, we make money. We do make money, and we make pretty good money now over the last 2 years. And I think we have focused 100% on the functionality of the app. And I think it doesn't look as shiny and nice as some of these other apps that are doing sort of similar things, but not really the same. For us, I think the UX, the interface, for me, that's sort of easy. That's just design stuff. You pay a designer. We've never paid a designer the crappy design that I will hold my hand up. That was myself, Jonathan, and a guy called Vu who did that. And
nice.
Yeah, people sort of love the scrappiness of it, I guess. But I think what they really appreciate is just how good the functionality is, and how it actually does give you a specific nutrition program that is based on the training that you're actually doing. And I think that's the kicker, because no other app in the world does what we do for an athlete. And I think we are laser focused on the triathlete group. I guess my line of thinking was, if we can do it for triathletes, we can pretty much do it for anyone because it's three sports in one,
Yeah,
and they're
seriously.
extremely type A. So
Yeah.
if you can meet their needs, then I'm pretty sure everyone else will sort of fall in line. And we are seeing that now with cyclists and marathon runners and half marathon runners and ultra runners getting involved and getting on board and loving the service as well. So it's a pretty exciting time.
Yeah. 100%. So, in one sentence, just because I could put it together and I think most people can understand what FuelIn is, but kind of in one sentence, and I should have asked this earlier, like, what exactly is it?
Yeah. So I guess it's the world's first training-based nutrition app. So it delivers a truly personalized and periodized nutrition program based specifically on the
Training output.
actual training you're doing. So you can sync it with your training program. So if you're on Training Peaks, Final Surge, or TriDot, you can sync it with your coach's training plan. It will deliver that in a matter of seconds. You can also build out your own training calendar on FuelIn now. So say you don't have a training program, but you're pretty recreational and you go, yeah, I like to run 3 times a week and I run on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can build that into FuelIn for like a training block, and we'll do all your macros, your calories and everything every day for every meal.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
And I was just
pretty
looking
cool.
at, as you were talking, I was looking at the different packages and it seems interesting. Like, but I'm curious if I was to miss a session or 3 sessions that week, like, will it adjust based on what you actually did and didn't do?
So that's the kicker. So you can do that. You just have to refresh. So if you missed your
Okay.
plans, you would just have to refresh. What we're trying to do with Garmin is actually do that in real time. So at the
Yeah.
time you press stop on your most people. So not everyone has Training Peaks or TriDot or Final Surge, but majority of athletes have a Garmin watch or an Apple Watch. So
Yeah.
what
Sure.
we're working on is that at the time you press stop and it syncs to Apple Health or to Garmin, that would then upload in real time and then adjust as required. Now, I guess a lot of people don't realize this, but say you missed a 40-minute run or something, it's not going to change your nutrition program
Sure.
that much. If you had like a 5-hour, bike ride, then yeah, we'd probably downgrade the amount of carbohydrates you had. You probably wouldn't change your protein intake, fat intake, or anything like that. You'd probably just manipulate the carbohydrates. And that's typically, again, like, I guess the secret sauce of the program is, yes, we deliver a fairly moderate to high amount of protein based on the current research for young, old, male, female. Fat, so protein and fat stays fairly similar throughout the days of the week, and that would be manipulated based on the body weight of the individual and what their overall purpose is, like if they're trying to lose weight or gain weight or stay stable. But then you manipulate carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are generally the easiest macronutrient to manipulate, and generally probably the most relevant because based on intensity and duration of training, it's going to fluctuate whether you need high amounts of carbohydrates or lower amounts of carbohydrates.
Okay. Yeah, it seems really awesome. I may have to give it a shot.
Yeah, it's
Do you
cool.
do any free trials to like give it a go where you can plug it in, or is it like you got to pay and start using it?
Well, it's very good that you say that. We actually don't have a freemium model, I guess, because of the way we started up with absolutely zero cash. We
Yeah.
just needed some money, so we didn't do a freemium. It is something that's on the roadmap. We're just trying to figure out
Sure.
what we should give for free versus what we should have in the
Yeah.
paid version.
Sure.
I'm sure we can sort you out, mate, and give you something. I know for the listeners, we're going to give like the 30% off. So like I think the code
Oh,
is
cool.
SQ30. And that gives them 30% off the first month, which would be good. There is going to be a change in the pricing and the tiers coming. So we're going to do like monthly, quarterly, annually for that
Okay.
and sort of adjust that. And that should be live hopefully by next week. Depends on when this, I guess, is released. This
Yeah,
episode.
this will air after that, so it'll be perfect.
Yeah, so it should be around there. And we just, we can provide a link as well where athletes can go and check it out.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting though. Like a lot of athletes do ask for the freemium, and it's something that we just haven't done. But if you look at lifetime value of an athlete, most athletes stay on for just under 9 months on the program. And what we're seeing now is a huge uptake in the annual plan, the annual subscription. I guess
Yeah,
athletes
good.
are like, you know what? I do 2 or 3 races or something like that in a year. I use it for that. Then they stop using it for a period of time and then go from there. So it sort of becomes I guess it's a little bit more expensive than Netflix, but it's sort of in that line, and you use it when you need it. And I guess if you think about going to see a nutritionist or a dietitian, that can cost anywhere from $250 to $500 for a one-off session. And this gives you, a truly personalized experience every single day. And depending on the tier you're on, you can actually get, communication daily with the nutrition expert. And, we have a team of 4 where every person on there has university degrees, education. We have a fellow of Sports Dietitians Australia. He's a researcher and lecturer, Dr. Alan McCubbin. He's got 30 published papers. Megan Foley, a registered dietitian in America, and then Elizabeth Impen, who has a master's in exercise physiology. So the team is, fairly weighty and fairly well established in the world of not just endurance sports, but sport in general. And I think that's, it's all about credibility, I think, in that respect. And a couple of cool things with the app that just are coming out, so you can sync things like MyFitnessPal and lose it to it. So you can track your macros that way. But we're just in beta testing, actually, and hopefully it will get released to a beta group next week. But that's an AI food tracker. So you actually can just talk to it. And that will all be in-house. So you can just sort of say, I had 2 eggs, half an avocado, a couple of slices of toast this morning, and a flat white, and it logs all the macros. And it's like, it's pretty awesome. So I think that will sort of really, I think a lot of athletes are going to really enjoy that, just mainly because food tracking is a bit of a pain in the ass.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah, you got to be pretty dedicated.
Right, where's that at?
Yeah, exactly.
That's super interesting. With the AI portion, is that built on OpenAI's API with their large language model, or is that one of your guys' your own? Or
so we're using OpenAI at the moment, and then what we're going to be doing is then linking that into a dedicated database for foods, which will be verified and dietitian verified, which I think is the natural progression, so that athletes know that what they're logging is as accurate as it can be. I mean, the thing about logging that most people don't understand is that there's always going to be a degree of error. Even what you see on the back of a label is not 100% accurate.
I worked in food for a while.
Exactly. So you know what it's like. And so I think when we talk about macronutrients and calories, it's always targets. Like, it's not specifics. Work in targets. If you're targeting, 180 grams of protein throughout the day, if you get anywhere near that as a mark of 2 or 3 grams per kilo of body weight, you've done probably very well, and certainly better than the majority of people.
Yeah, 100%. So it sounds like you've definitely gotten used to the entrepreneur world. You've been doing FuelIn for how many years now?
Well, we're three and a bit, I think, total.
Okay.
But 2 and a bit years since we launched the iOS app, and it's definitely due for a refresh, and that's all coming. It's all pretty exciting. I think the entrepreneurial world I think it's enlightening and it's stressful all in the same day. You sort of have 4 seasons in one day, pretty much every day.
Yep.
And
full cycle.
My partner can certainly attest to that. I think learning breathing exercises and some form of mindfulness is incredibly important. I'm terrible at it, and I'm very good at giving advice. I'm not necessarily that great at taking my own advice. My stress management is probably exercise. I got up this morning and did a 12K run or whatever, just to clear my head and sort of just get out and about. And I know if I exercise, I'm generally in a good space. If I don't exercise, then it's sort of chaos starts to occur. So I think the weird thing about entrepreneurial world and doing what I do now is I'm stuck at a desk the whole bloody time. And I've never had back pain in my life. And now I've got this like left buttock ache and like just soreness. And I'm like, oh God. And, when I was a physio, I'd treat this stuff all the time. And now I realize just don't sit at a desk. Yeah. Like, literally don't sit at a desk and you'll be fine.
You need one of those walking desks or standing desks.
Oh, I need a standing desk, definitely. Yeah. And it's like, so yeah, it's, I'm very fortunate to have the team that we have. It's a very small team. We had a new acquisition, a new growth and revenue officer, a guy called Garrett Muller join, who comes, do you know the company Fabletics?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't know what Fabletics were, and then it turns out like
Bigger in America, yeah.
they're like the second biggest retailer of online athleisure wear in the world, like Kate Hudson's
Yeah.
group and that. And I'm like, oh shit. And they
Yeah.
handle like Rihanna's lingerie line and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that. That's funny.
yeah, and I was like, oh wow. And so he was CEO in Europe, or operations officer and stand-in CEO at the time. So, he's got a wealth of experience in terms of
Yeah.
scaling businesses, especially subscription models. So he's been, it's funny when you have someone who actually knows what they're doing as well come in
Yeah.
and start talking stuff. And like, you always resist. You're always like, no, this is
What
how
are you
we do
talking
it.
about? This is my
What are you
shit.
talking about?
Yeah.
This is how we do it. And then you're like, maybe I should shut up and just listen to him. And I'm still not very good at that, but I'm getting better. And I'm like, you know what? Let's give it a go. You're the expert. We're talking about the new tiers and the website and all that. And it's all going to be, hopefully the new website drops next week with the new tiers and all this. And it's his wheelhouse, man. And I'm like, you know what? I'm the health expert. I'm not the website or acquisition growth expert. And yeah, we've done well. We've got over 1,000 monthly users at the moment doing what they do, and that's cool. But we want 3,000 to 5,000 this year. That's the goal.
Yeah.
And I do believe we'll get there. And by having the right team around us, and if we do raise a bit of money, it will certainly make it a lot easier. But even without that, I think we can still achieve that, which is cool.
Yeah, good deal. Well, a couple of more questions for you. With this entrepreneurial journey, you mentioned your wife a few times. How has it affected your relationship with your wife and the family, with the different level of commitment, the lack, may I say, of income? You're dwindling the savings a little bit. You're selling a little bit of a pipe dream. Tell me about that relationship and how that's grown or dealt with that.
Well, firstly, Mel's my partner. We're not married, although we were joking. I was joking. My friend, another friend of mine, just proposed the other day. It's his second marriage, and I haven't been married before. And she said she was up all night stressing about something, and I was like, "Is it because I told you that Brad got engaged and they're getting married, and you want to get married?" And she's like, "No, that is the last thing that I'm thinking about." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Anyway. No, so we're not married. We actually met during COVID. It's a pretty wild story. So I met her start of 2020, and then we all got locked down in Sydney, and literally on the day it was like everyone's getting locked down, and you can choose a lockdown buddy. And she was going to go into the city to go to work, and I was like, if you go to work, I probably won't see you ever again. And then she got a message on email saying, no one's to come into the office, locked down. And I was like, so are you staying? And she was like, yeah, sounds good. We'd only known each other for a few weeks. And then we literally got locked down, and I guess COVID accelerated relationships in a big way.
Yeah, pretty quick, I'd imagine.
3 years later, I got 2 kids. So she's awesome, and she's very entrepreneurial. So she actually, when I first met her, she had an app, a massage app, and it was called the Uber of massage. So you literally log on, and massage therapists just rock up to your house and stuff. And it's cool. It's still going. She does it mainly for aged care now, but she's quite entrepreneurial, and she didn't want to go back to doing her job. She was an EA, executive assistant. So she's very organized and that, which is great for me.
Yeah.
But she's actually set up her own company during second pregnancy. And that's sort of, again, it's a startup, and she's actually doing really well with it. And it's super cool. It's related to a product called myo-inositol. I don't know if you know what myo-inositol is.
I don't.
It's a supplement it's a form of carbohydrate actually, but it's used for women who struggle to get pregnant or suffer from a condition called PCOS. So PCOS is what's called polycystic ovary syndrome.
I've heard of that.
And it often inhibits women from getting pregnant. So this form of Mel had polycystic ovary syndrome, which obviously reduced her likelihood of getting pregnant. And obviously I'm an old guy, so it's oh shit, double up. So she started taking this supplement at the time, and doing a few other things nutrition wise. And thankfully she got pregnant twice. And so she was like, I think there's something to this. There was emerging research coming out So then she set up a company. She got it manufactured with Therapeutic Goods Australia, which is like, I guess, the equivalent of FDA or something like that over there. And she set up a company called Inner Edition, which is going really well. And women who suffer from PCOS or are looking to improve fertility, they've been snapping up her product and getting pretty cool results. So it's a feel good story. Like it's not a bullshit sort of supplement. There's some pretty interesting research. I mean, even the man Huberman was talking about myo-inositol the other day, and if Huberman's talking about it, it's got to be right. So
for sure. That guy's well studied, man.
Yeah, so it's cool. I mean, he was talking about it in terms of benefits of sleep, which I was unaware of, but it's certainly been researched in. So they usually give a supplement called metformin or a medication called metformin, which is typically used in diabetics. So metformin and myo-inositol have been studied in parallel, and actually myo-inositol comes out with comparable results, and it's not a medication. So it can be very useful in terms of blood glucose control and stuff like that, as well as improving fertility.
It's a carb though, inositol, like an alcohol.
No, it's a form of carbohydrate. So I think it's an isomer, a carbohydrate isomer, I think, off the top of my head. And which is ironic because you think of dealing with glucose control, would it have a positive impact or a negative? But it does help with blood glucose control. And those who are pre-diabetic or diabetic, it has similar effects as metformin.
Interesting. Do you know where it's derived? Like, is it I'm talking over.
Is it a synthetic derivative?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's derived, like they manufacture it effectively.
How do you even do that? Some chemist in a lab, he's throwing stuff together and like, oh yeah, let's give this one a shot. Like,
I think so. I actually don't know in terms of that, but it's a powder. You buy it in a powder form, and there's two types of there's probably more than two types, but there's two. There's what's called myo-inositol, and then dechiro-inositol, and then myo-inositol, and they often have them as a very sort of 40-to-1 blend, but then they've also shown that just myo-inositol on its own is just as effective. So I know we've gone big segue into pregnancy and PCOS and stuff.
I love it. I think it's great.
It's super. I mean,
it's fascinating.
I think the interesting thing from my perspective is watching her develop a brand, develop the strategy, like talking to her Google person who's handling Google and then the person handling Facebook and ads, and how they're manipulating the ads. And it's things that we never did with FuelIn, like absolutely terrible with marketing, and marketing was always just word of mouth. Like we've never spent any money on marketing. But then watching what she's done, it is a good way to go. But I think with a product like hers, because it's so specific, the targeted and retargeted marketing we're using Google, especially Google Shopping, it's pretty incredible, like how it works, and just seeing how she's getting sales as a result of that. Like it's really cool.
Yeah, it's a whole thing in itself. I've worked. One of my close friends he started a marketing company that he just sold to one of my other friends actually. But getting to look under the hood and use his business through a couple of different startups that I've done and working with other companies, it's pretty amazing once you get into the weeds, like how technical you can get on just like you're saying, Google Shopping, or the right kind of words that you want to bid on, and looking at a specific market and
changing
even
it
bidding on words that are misspelled. Yeah, it's just crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm 100% happy to be a kept man. If her business takes off and she wants to be like, the sugar mama, I'm completely fine with that. We joke about that. We always joke, and it's like, okay, so I've got like technically a tech business, and she's now got a product startup, and we're like, one day we'll have made it, and we will have done good. We'll laugh. We'll look back at these really tough days. I mean, you asked what's the impact? It can be really stressful.
Sure.
Like we don't struggle. Like I'm not going to lie and say we're eating baked beans. Oh, I mean, I ate baked beans and sardines all the time, but like
by choice, not by force.
Yeah, we eat very well. We live in a fantastic area in Sydney on the northern beaches, down like literally a 5-minute walk to the beach. Like I'm not struggling.
You live a hard life.
It's not. Yeah, like I'm like I got to be serious here, but I think it's the mental stress.
Yeah.
It's not, the physical stress, it's not there. Like in that respect, we've got a house, got a roof over our head, we've got running water, electricity and all that. It is bloody expensive in Australia, though. Sydney is like
Yeah.
literally one of the most expensive places on earth. So it is stressful with regards to that and mortgages and stuff. But I think it's just the mental stress of like, when you got, as I said right at the start, you got a kid with, some learning disabilities, or special needs, I should say. Two kids, you then start thinking, okay, are we going to have enough money to look after them for schooling and all that? And then, do we have enough money to do this and that? And, how are we going to be? I think it just grinds on you a little bit. And so
Yeah.
it builds up over time. And then I think, again, it's like comes down to that, how do you handle that? And it's something, Mel's talked to me and she's very good with this, is like, are you going to talk to someone this year? We do this thing every year of like, well, each year we do a CCC, which is culture, culinary, and concerts. So we have to take those three things. They're like our New Year's resolution. So you got to take someone to a culinary experience or do something culinary, take them to a concert, and then the other thing is what was it? Culinary and culture. So I usually take her to an art gallery or something like that.
Okay.
It's quite cool. So obviously we're going to Ben Howard. She's taking me to Ben Howard. It's her favorite artist. I'm taking her to Pearl Jam because that's my favorite
Ben
artist.
Howard. Yeah, I love Ben Howard.
Yeah, Ben Howard's good. And then I'm taking her to Pearl Jam on their Dark Matter tour because our youngest son, Jack, is actually middle name is Eddie, after Eddie Vedder. So I'm a bit of a super fan.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, which is cool. And then we'll do the culture and culinary. But then this year we were talking about like healthy, wealthy, wise as resolutions as well. And like, what are we going to do to health? What are we going to do for wealth? And what are we doing for wise? And her healthy is to do one chin up. And she always laughs. She's like, what's yours again? And I'm like, oh, run a marathon or something. And she's like, wants to do one chin up. And we always have a laugh. But for wise, mine this year was to go and talk to someone. Just say, like, I presume a psychologist of some description.
Okay,
and,
like counseling or something like
just
that.
go and talk to someone just about everything that goes on in life, I guess. And my biggest probably stress is Jack, to be honest. Like, if I had to put everything in perspective, FuelIn, relationship, Jack, kids, it would be Jack. It's just that fear of the unknown and stress of what's going on. So just talking to someone maybe who doesn't know you and just sort of venting, I guess, is what sometimes you need. So I've reached out to friends and they've been really good about talking about it. I think when you get to our age, it's a pretty comfortable conversation to have with your friends and your close circle to say, hey, man, have you spoken to anyone? And everyone's like, oh, yeah, I use this guy. Or, a friend will go, oh, I use this lady or whatnot. So it's something to do. I've never done it, and it's probably well overdue, to be honest. And
oh yeah, man, do it. So I had a lot of people ask me to do that and force me to do it, obviously, or even when I was really young after my father passed. But ever since then, as I've gotten older, I've seen the value in it. And like, I mean, my wife and I, we've been married almost 7 years in June, and
congrats.
We've been through some ups. Yeah, thank you. We've been through some ups. We've also been through some serious downs. Like 1 year, I was dealing with my own junk, and then I got held at gunpoint. And then like a couple weeks later, her grandfather died in a tragic tractor accident with all the family. And like this stuff kept piling on. And we got to a point where she brought up the word divorce, and like that word had never been said before. But I knew like, man, we got to make a change. So I was like, you're going to counseling by yourself. I'm going to counseling by myself, therapy. Then we're going to go together. And honestly, it took probably 7 months because when we walked into those first sessions together, the question was asked, what is your commitment level to each other right now? And my wife, I think, was sitting at like a 2.5 out of 10. I was at like a 6. And by the time we left, like she was more committed than I was. So I was like, yeah, I mean, it took a while, and it took a lot of tears and frustration and whatnot. But all of that to say, somebody who's like a good therapist who's training in that specific area that you really can connect with, because I've gone to multiple ones to try to find a good fit, and that's part of like the crux of it, where it's like, oh, I hate doing this, because you have to like reopen up yourself the first time. They're taking a bunch of notes, and you really don't get to work for a few sessions. But I can't talk it up enough, because I think that my parents and their generation, like they did, that mental health really wasn't as much of a focus. And I think you can go too much in that area, like blame everything on mental health, but there's a balance a sharp edge that I think we should try to balance on and get help, because like, yeah, we're all going through stuff. Everybody's got a story. Every person I've talked to on this podcast, when they do be vulnerable, like you've done, about your son and the other stuff that you've gone through, we've all got something we're dealing with. So I'll be cheering you on. I'll
Yeah.
email you. I'm even email you, be like, Scott, have you done it yet? Come on, like let's
Yeah.
get that first session in the books.
I think what you said a few things there actually. That we talked about, like, yeah, going separately and then going to something together as well. I think that is really important. I see the value in that. Like, as I said, I've been married and we just didn't talk. We didn't cover that. And in the end, the commitment wasn't there. And then because we both weren't committed and weren't willing necessarily to put the effort, was it too far gone? I don't know, but maybe we could have put the effort in. Who knows what would have happened. But I think in this case with Mel, like, it's like, we talk about it already. It's like preempting and saying, let's get on top of this before it becomes too much of an issue. Because I think there is always that tipping point, isn't there? It's like, when things go too far, it's like, man, you just can't pull this back. And I think you see that.
It feels hopeless.
It feels hopeless in that sense. So, and then you mentioned about, like, the older generation. And I went for a bushwalk with my mum the other day, and I was carrying Jack in the backpack and just talking to mum. And I said to her, like, obviously, like, there's this whole, whether you call it a woke movement or whatnot, like, you see this at the moment. There's a lot of it, like complaining about everything and very emotional, and everyone's in touch with their emotions. Everyone's got a problem. I guess and then, like, the generation, my generation looks at that and goes, oh my God, can you just be not so soft? And then I said to my mum, like, did you look at our generation and be like, oh God, don't be so soft? So it probably goes all in layers and eras. But
yeah.
I also, like, Mel pointed out to me, she said, but like that, your mum's age group and dad's age group, okay, they may think it's soft, but they carry a lot in them and don't talk about that. And so they're inherently potentially very unhappy, but they just don't voice it. And if they actually voiced it, it might help a lot, but they see that as being soft. And so it's like, there is this balance. It's like you've got the very young group who are super emotional and, want to talk about their emotions all the time. And there's always an issue with pretty much everything, versus the older generation who probably have a lot of things that they want to complain about, but they're so stoic and the way they hold themselves that it just grinds them to the point where they're actually quite miserable as well. But they just don't
you almost
talk
die
about
inside.
it. Yeah. So I think, look, I've encouraged my mum and my dad to talk to people. Doesn't always happen, but they have done it. It's the last point would be, your bit about, you got to find the person that fit. It's the whole goodwill hunting thing, isn't it? Like, for anyone who doesn't know that film, it's obviously a very old film with Robin Williams and Matt Damon, but he goes through all those different therapists before he finds Robin Williams, and you've got to find your fit, don't you?
Yeah,
it takes
100%. It's like, it's unfortunate, but I mean, at the same time, it's fortunate because you learn a lot about yourself. It's like dating almost.
Yeah.
Because I figure out, okay, here's what I know I need, here's what I know I don't need, and here's what I dislike and like, and there's a balance to be struck.
Yeah.
But I mean, all good things in life come with a little toil, at least on this earth.
Yeah.
So,
no, I agree with that. Well, nothing. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I was asked a question once on a podcast, and it was like, what would you tell yourself, your younger self? And I always see that question from everyone, and they're always like, oh, I'd tell them not to work as hard. And I'm like, that is such bullshit. Like, the only reason I got to where I am is because I worked really bloody hard. Yeah. Like, if you don't work hard, like, don't expect a lot. Like, there are these people out there that don't do anything and they somehow get lucky. But the majority of people you see, like, who have got whatever is deemed to be success in your eyes, have worked really bloody hard for it.
Yeah.
Whether that be material wealth, whether it be physical fitness, whether it be enlightenment, like, they have worked bloody hard to get it.
Yeah.
And so, like, that whole notion of like, oh yeah, don't work too hard when you're young, everything will be fine. I'm like, yeah, not really. So I would tell myself, keep working, keep pushing, maybe be a little bit more patient with things, but keep pushing.
Beautiful. Well, Scott, thank you so much for jumping on and answering all of these questions and for diving so deep. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Unfortunately, I have to go jump. I got to take my wife down to the airport, but it has been an honor. I'm looking forward to seeing how FuelIn does and how you do. And yeah, I mean, it's been a great opportunity to get to talk with you. I hope to do it again, actually, so we can dive into some more of these topics because I feel like I could talk to you for hours.
Mate, I would love that. It's always funny when you are on a show, any podcast show, you sort of I guess you talk about a lot of similar things with people because they don't know you, and then it's only in round two where you actually then dive into some of the juicy things. And although saying that, we've probably covered far more juicy questions than I have in any other podcast. So thank you for pushing me, I guess. Some of the questions aren't that comfortable and the responses, and so hopefully the listeners can appreciate the position that I'm coming from. And I guess the real insight I get from even looking at when you asked me a lot of the questions and making me think about them, and we didn't even get into all of them, is it just makes you think about like what an individual goes through. And on the surface, I think everything's shiny, isn't it, for everyone? And it's only when you actually start talking and asking real questions to people that they give a real response. And so what I would say to most people is when you ask a question like, how are you, to a friend, like actually take time to listen. And also if you are asked that question, how are you, and you're not that good, don't say good. Like give a real response, because if they're a real friend or someone you really love, then they'll respect that response, whatever you say. And often it catches them completely off guard. And you're like, I'm not that good, man. And they're like, what? And then it leads to a pretty cool conversation afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. Great advice. Well, thank you so much, Scott. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Seth. Really enjoyed it, mate.
Thank you so much to Scott for coming on and sharing so much of his life. We covered a wide range of topics, as you are well aware, and I thank you guys for taking a listen and taking interest. I really do enjoy this process of putting these podcasts out and meeting so many amazing people. If you made it to this point in the podcast, just want to say thank you so much. No matter where you're listening, watching, or viewing, it would be really awesome if you could like, comment, subscribe, and review this podcast. It helps us to grow and get the word out there. And also, if you would like to join our newsletter, you can do that at the stupidquestions.show website, where you can scroll down and enter your email there, or you can check out other giveaways and things we have going on. Make sure to check out that website and follow us on Instagram. All right. We will catch you guys in the next one. Adios.